Good afternoon, Karen.
Thanks for having me on.
Take a few minutes, if you could, and provide the backstory or the history of the tragedy of thalidomide for those not familiar.
Okay, yes. It was first marketed in 1956 by a German company called Grunenthal, and it was sold then as a sedative and a flu remedy. Within a short time, it started to be marketed in various other European countries, the UK, Norway, even Japan. And Canada approved it for use in 1961, and it was even promoted within Canada as a morning sickness remedy. So it was deliberately promoted to pregnant women. But the company, Grunenthal, had actually been receiving complaints from doctors about side effects for years, as early as 1959, and it had just been ignoring them. And as a result of that, the side effects were that women were having miscarriages and stillbirths, and many thousands of children, an estimate is 15,000 babies, were born alive with malformations, shortened limbs. I've actually met one person who had virtually no arms. She just had little tiny hands at the end of very shortened arms. So there were about 15,000 of those worldwide, and it was withdrawn from the Canadian market in 1962 and around the world as well. The U.S. never used it, interestingly. It was never approved in the U.S., so they avoided this tragedy. But ever since then, thalidomide has stood for the proposition that you don't give anything to a pregnant woman without making sure that it has been thoroughly safety tested.
Right. The lesson here with regards to the COVID 19 vaccine, which is being offered to pregnant women, is what?
Well, the lesson should be that since this hasn't been safety tested, and the actual drug manufacturers' inserts for all of these vaccines actually say it has not been safety tested on pregnant women, so there's no data suggesting that it's safe. And the onus has always been on the drug manufacturer to prove that something is safe before it's administered to a pregnant woman. But instead, what's happening is that I've read a letter to my local newspaper in Prince Edward County from a medical doctor, MD, saying, well, there's no reason not to take it because we don't have any evidence that it's harmful. That changes the onus completely. Proof that it's safe is completely different from saying there's no evidence that it's harmful. Because if someone says that to you, you have to ask, well, how far did you look? Who looked? Were you very thorough in looking for evidence of harm? Because what I've discovered after I saw that in the newspaper and was shocked by it, I actually went out and looked to see if there was evidence of harm. And indeed, there is. And so this doctor just simply doesn't know what the evidence is. She can say very cavalierly, I've seen no evidence of harm, but I have, and other people are seeing evidence of harm.
So tell me what you found by researching the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System database in the United States.
Right. So this database has existed for decades. It's run by the U.S. government. It's called VAERS for short, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. And people who experience an adverse effect from a vaccine can report to this, or their doctors can file a report, or in combo they can do it. But it's a voluntary system. And so as a result of that, many people don't even know about it. Even doctors in the U.S. don't know about it. And certainly many patients don't know about it. And often people don't even interpret an adverse effect from a vaccine as being from the vaccine, or their doctors will sort of poo-poo that and say, well, it's just coincidence. But a study that was actually done, commissioned by the U.S. government in 2010, so a decade ago, said that we estimate as a result of our investigations that only 1% of the adverse effects that people actually experience from vaccines ever make it into this database. So you can look at the database now and say, geez, it might be 100 times. Whatever's reported there, the truth might be 100 times worse. There were actually 57 reports when I looked at it just a week or two ago of vaccine-related congenital anomalies or birth defects.
Related
So
to the COVID-19 vaccine.
yes, I searched under COVID-19 vaccines, all incidents. There's actually over 60,000 reported adverse reactions now, which if the 1% figure still holds true, that's like 6 million adverse events reported. But under birth defect and congenital anomalies, there were 57 when I looked a couple of weeks ago. So if the 1% figure is correct, that means about 5,700 possible cases of birth defects.
We should point out, though, that a mere filing of a report doesn't necessarily mean that there is in other words,
That's right.
correlation does not mean causation.
That's right. It's not proof, but it certainly is some evidence. You know, if the doctor is saying there's no evidence, she's wrong. There is evidence. There's 57 people who have reported, who have taken the trouble to report in a system that is voluntary and that most people don't even know about. 57 people have reported that there have been problems with their babies after the vaccine. And of course, there's still women being vaccinated now. Their babies won't even be born for months, so we don't know what's going to happen to those.
You're not saying that women should not be getting a vaccine, but simply they should remember the case of thalidomide and do their research.
Well, I can tell you that if I were pregnant now and I were offered the vaccine, my choice would be not to take it. So everyone can decide for themselves, but I don't think it's appropriate for a doctor to be saying, go ahead because there's no evidence of harm when she clearly hasn't done her homework, and there is actually evidence that some people have associated having the vaccine with birth defect in their child because they took the trouble to report it in a system that very few people even know about.
Karen, thank you very much for your time.
Oh, you're welcome, Richard, anytime.
Karen Selleck is a retired lawyer and a columnist for the Western Standard.